My name is Captain Nightwhisper. Most of the time, when a soldier dies, the silence comes fast. The call signs get reassigned. The name on the roster gets a black line through it. The radio that used to carry their voice goes back on the shelf to wait for the next pair of hands. War is good at endings, but sometimes the line doesn't cut clean. Sometimes, whatever we send up into the air doesn't come back down with us. In the early days of long-range comms, operators used to talk about ghost carriers, signals that outlived the men who sent them, old recordings bleeding onto new frequencies, lost transmissions finally arriving decades late. That's the comforting version. This file isn't about static. It's not about a tape playing where it shouldn't. It's about a unit that buried one of their own, folded the flag, sent the letter home, and then got him back on the radio 3 days later. Authentic call sign, correct authentication code, information he should not have known. You can write off one transmission as a glitch, two as a crossed line, but when the dead start calling your Tolguk by name and giving you warnings that save your life, you have to ask yourself, are you talking to what's left of the man you lost? Or has something else figured out how to use his voice? This is the story I call The Soldier Who Radioed Us 3 days after he died. On paper, he was Specialist Joshua Josh Mercer, Echo Company, 2nd Battalion, 19th Infantry. To the radio, he was just Echo 4. He was the guy everyone pictured when they heard that call sign. Too big helmet, too loud laugh, the kind of grin that made it hard to stay mad at him for long. He was 23. He'd been in country for 7 months and 12 days. And on a Thursday morning that smelled like burned dust and cheap coffee, Echo Company zipped him into a bag on the side of the road and called it in. "Ridgepoint, this is Echo 6, the company commander said over the net, voice flat in that way you only get by pushing everything inconvenient down into your boots. Be advised, we have 1 KIA. Repeat, 1 KIA. Over." The patrol had walked into a textbook ambush. First a pressure plate IED under the lead vehicle, then small arms fire from a wadi that had looked empty until it wasn't. Mercer had been leaning out of the back hatch when the blast went off. By the time the dust settled, he wasn't leaning on anything. The medic did what he could. It wasn't much. Tourniquets, chest seals, hands pressed where no amount of pressure would matter. "Check his radio," Staff Sergeant Hall muttered out of habit as he worked. "We're not losing the only long-range set we got over this." It should have sounded worse than it did. That's the thing about war. It teaches you to triage everything, including your own conscience. The radio had survived. Mercer hadn't. By that afternoon, they'd moved his body back to the forward operating base. Chaplin said the right words. The company stood in a loose, crooked formation on a patch of gravel behind the motor pool, while the sun went down behind the blast walls. There was the rifle in the boots, the helmet on top, the dog tags hanging, turning slow in the hot wind. Someone read the standard piece about courage, sacrifice, ultimate price. Some of it probably applied to Mercer. But what the men remembered wasn't the speech. It was his last transmission before the blast. "Echo 6, this is Echo 4, he'd said, cheerful even then, riding that high everybody got when the air was clear and the convoy was on time. "Route looks all sunshine and puppies so far. Over." Static. Then the explosion. No last words, no dramatic farewell. Just a joke about puppies cut off mid-breath. By the time darkness settled over the base that night, Mercer's bunk was empty. His gear was stacked on his mattress in tight, folded squares. His name tape had been peeled off his locker door. The radio he'd carried, battered, scarred, still smelling faintly of sweat and dust and melted plastic, sat on a workbench in the comms tent. Sergeant Clay, the senior COMMO guy, wiped a rag over it. "Guess you're mine again," he muttered. He had no way of knowing that, in a way that didn't fit into any manual he'd ever read. It wasn't done with Mercer yet. 3 days before, Mercer's voice had been just one more sound in the constant buzz. The forward base sat in a shallow bowl between two ridgelines. By day, it was a heat sink. By night, it was a nest of green lights and quiet murmurs. Radios never really slept there. There were always patrols stepping off, resupply convoys, calling in checkpoints, medevac birds breaking in with that unmistakable urgency. Mercer had been good at finding signal in the noise. Guy's half antenna, Clay liked to say. Point him at a hill, and he can talk to God. He wasn't wrong. Mercer could get a whisper through a thunderstorm with half a battery and a frayed whip antenna if you gave him 5 minutes and told everyone else to shut up. The last clean transmission he sent had come just 11 minutes before the blast took his legs and his breath and anything like a future. Echo 6, this is Echo 4, over. Send it, the CO replied, leaning over the map spread across the hood of a truck, pen hovering over the route. Just past Checkpoint Delta. Locals are giving us their usual stares and finger-pointing, Mercer said. No eyes on anything juicy. Over. Copy Echo 4. Stay sharp. Always do, sir. Echo 4 out. The comms log recorded the exchange. Time, frequency, call signs. There was nothing strange about it. The strangeness came after. When the IED went off, the radio squawked once. Ho 4, break. We've got... A crack. A roar. A noise like the world being shaken all at once. Then silence. Static filled the hole for a few seconds before other voices crashed in. Contact front. Man down, man down. Ridge point. This is Echo 6. Troops in contact. Troops in contact. It was messy, frantic, the usual chaos of a bad 5 minutes. None of it was Mercer's voice. His side of the net was done. By the time the dust settled, he was a set of coordinates and a medical category, and a formal notification message marching its way up the chain. When Clay pulled the recorded log later that night, because that's what you do, you listen again, you see if there was something you missed, he let the audio play through twice. Nothing out of place, no weird echoes, no background whispers, just Mercer, alive, complaining about finger-pointing villagers. Alive, then gone. Cause of death, shrapnel, blood loss. Manner of death, hostile action. Final disposition, remains prepared for transport. Personal effects inventoried. There was no box to check for. We'll call back later. 3 days after the ambush, the war rolled on. New patrols went out along the same roads. New names got slapped onto the same risk management sheets. The motor pool smelled like oil and sun-heated metal. Hall had the duty officer shift that night. He hated duty, paperwork, radio watch, walking the perimeter every hour with a clipboard, pretending the fence could stop anything that truly wanted in. By 01 o'clock, the base had settled into that strange half-sleep. Generators hummed. A few late smokers stood in small knots by the HESCO barriers, talking in low voices. The sky was a spill of cold stars. Inside the Tokoi, the Tactical Operations Center, Clay sat at the comms rack, boots up on a spare chair, headset half on, flipping through a dog-eared magazine someone had left behind. The radio net was quiet. Too quiet. You jinx it by saying that out loud. I'm punching you, Hall muttered, pouring himself another cup of coffee that had gone from bad to worse 2 hours earlier. Clay smirked. Roger, top. My lips are sealed. He was about to go back to his magazine when the long-range set on the far left, the one Mercer had loved, the one with the finicky tuner, clicked. The speaker cracked, hissed, and then, Echo 6. Echo 6. This is Echo 4. Radio check. Over. Clay blinked. He sat up. Hall looked over from the map table. You hear that? Clay swallowed. Yeah, he said slowly. Probably somebody fat-fingered a call sign. The speaker spat again. Echo 6. This is Echo 4. Radio check. How copy? Over. The voice was clear, undistorted, young, casual. Hall's hand tightened around his mug. "That's Mercer," he said. Clay's fingers moved on autopilot, keying the net. Station calling Echo 6. Say again your call sign. Over." A half-second delay. Then patiently, like he was repeating himself to someone with bad reception. "Echo 4, over." Clay's skin crawled. His eyes flicked to the board where they tracked unit status. Echo 4's marker had a black line through it. KIA. Hall stepped closer to the radios. "Who is this?" he demanded. "Identify with last four of your social. Over." There was a pause, a rustle of breath. 2194, the voice replied. "Over." Hall didn't need to check a file to know he was right. He'd filled out the death report himself. "Clay," he said quietly, off mic. "Check the source." Clay's fingers danced over the panel, checking which antenna, which repeater, which channel. "Long-range set, direct," he murmured. "No local rebroadcast. Looks like it's hitting from... Hell, that can't be right." "What?" Clay twisted a knob, squinting at the tiny, stubborn green numbers on the display. "It's coming off Hill 317, he said, near the Wadi." The place Mercer had died. Hall's mouth went dry. He hit the transmit key again. "Echo 4, this is Echo 6. Confirm your location. Over." Another pause. The voice on the other end took a breath that crackled faintly over the line. "Same as you left me, sir," it said. Over. The room felt suddenly smaller. The hum of the generators pressed in through the walls. Hall's eyes darted to the clock on the wall. 3 days and 13 minutes since Mercer's last heartbeat. He cut the transmit and looked at Clay. "Could be somebody screwing with us," he said. The words felt thin even as he said them. "Locals don't know our socials," Clay muttered. "And if Blue Platoon was playing games, I'd hear them laughing over the net." "Echo 4, Hall said slowly, keying the radio again. "What's your status?" "Over." Static. Then the faintest hint of a chuckle. KIA. Last I checked," the voice said. "Saw the paperwork go through. Over." Clay's hand trembled on the volume knob. Hall felt the hair on his arms stand up. "Cut it," he said. Clay hesitated. "Sergeant, I said cut it," Hall snapped. Clay flipped the main switch. The radio went dead with a final, soft click. Silence flooded in to fill the gap. The two men stared at the dark face of the set. "You're not going to write that in the log, are you?" Clay asked finally. Hall swallowed. He knew what the right answer was. Every transmission recorded. Every anomaly noted. "No," he said. "I am not." Outside, the night pressed against the concertina wire. In the icy air above Hill 317, something like a signal thinned, stretched, and refused to finish dying. The next day, nobody said anything. Hall told himself it had been a dream, or fatigue, or a prank, despite knowing no one had that call sign now, and no one but Mercer's file should have had that social. Clay avoided looking at the long-range set altogether. When the CO ran through the morning brief, patrol schedules, intel updates, a bland paragraph about continuing to engage with local leaders to build trust. Mercer's name didn't come up. It was like the man had gone from essential to erased in 72 hours. War does that. But that night, at 0113, the long-range set came on by itself. Clay wasn't on shift. He'd traded with a junior specialist named Donna, so he could get some sleep that wouldn't come. Donna was half dozing in the chair, headset skewed around his neck, when the speaker crackled. "Echo 6, this is Echo 4. You gonna keep me waiting all night again, or what?" "Over." Donna jerked so hard he knocked over his coffee. He fumbled with the headset, slapping it over his ears. Station calling Echo 6. Say again your call sign?" he stammered. "Echo 4, last time I checked," the voice said. a thread of amusement under the words. Unless somebody reassigned it while I was out. Over. Hall wasn't in the TOC. He was walking the perimeter, checking the towers. He heard the call over the base broadcast speaker, the same voice as the night before, as 3 days before. His stomach flipped. He broke into a jog. By the time he barreled into the TOC, Donna was white-faced and sweating, staring at the radios like they'd grown teeth. "You got him too?" Clay asked quietly from the doorway, drawn back by the sound. Donna nodded jerkily. That's Mercer," he said. "He's asking for you, Sergeant." Hall stepped up to the console, every movement careful, like sudden gestures might spook the thing on the other end of the invisible line. He keyed the mic. "Echo 4, this is Echo 6, he said. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. "You called in last night. Over." "Yeah, well," Mercer's voice replied. "Kinda short on entertainment where I am, sir. Figured I'd check in on the living. Over." Clay swallowed hard. Donner made a small, involuntary sound. Hall forced himself to focus. "Echo 4, where exactly is where you are? Over." A long pause. "Outside the wire," the voice said eventually. "Way outside. Over." Hall's skin prickled. "Are you in contact?" he asked. "Any enemy movement?" "Over." Mercer laughed softly. "Sir," he said, "if what's walking around out here is enemy, you're gonna need a new field manual. Over." The hairs on the back of Hall's neck stood up. "What do you want, Mercer?" he asked, switching to the name before he could stop himself. There was another pause. When the voice came back, it was quieter. "You're standing too close," it said. Hall frowned. "Too close to what?" "Over." "To the wadi," Mercer said. "To the houses. To the market. To the nice old man with the great tea who never ever looks you in the eye when you talk about patrol routes. Over." Hall glanced at the map. Blue Platoon was scheduled to run a dismounted patrol through the northern village the next afternoon. Same route as always. Same alleys. Same blind corners. "Are you saying there's an attack planned?" Hall asked. "Let's just say the locals know your habits better than you know theirs," Mercer replied. "Don't worry about how I know that. Call it a different angle. Over." Static hissed. "Don't run that route tomorrow," the voice added. "Push it a day, or change it, or don't. Your call. Over." Then, as if catching itself, "Request permission to, break and observe, sir. Over." Hall stared at the radio. He'd been in long enough to know something ugly when he smelled it. Intel didn't fall from the sky, but sometimes it came from places that didn't fit on a map. He looked at Clay. "Could someone be feeding this from outside the fob?" he murmured off mic. "Spoofing his voice?" Clay shook his head. "Not with that authentication," he said. "You asked Donner?" Donner nodded. "He gave his last 4 before you got here," he said, "and he called me by my nickname. I've only been here 4 weeks. Only Echo knew that. I sure as hell never wrote it down." Hall exhaled slowly. He keyed the mic again. "Echo 4, this is Echo 6, he said. "Copy your recommendation. We'll take it under advisement. Over." "Roger that, sir," Mercer said. "Figure I owe you one. Over." "For what?" Hall asked. "For not leaving me in that ditch too long," the voice said lightly. "Echo 4, out." The speaker went dead. The radio's status light stayed green for a second longer than it should have, humming faintly, like it was catching its breath. Then it went dark. In the morning, Hall called an audible on the patrol route. "IA meeting got pushed," he lied to the lieutenant. "Brass wants us to show the flag in Sector Blue instead." The LT grumbled, but agreed. They moved the Northern Market Patrol to the next day, filled the slot with a boring cordon and chat around the nearby school. That afternoon, the Marketplace Echo Company wasn't in Burned. A VBAD took out 3 stalls and a tea shop. where the nice old man usually sat. Secondary shooters fired from rooftops into the responding local police. No Americans died. "Dumb luck," the battalion S2 said later, tapping a stylus against the digital map. "Sometimes the timing just breaks in your favor." Hall didn't argue. He just stared at the blackened blotch on the screen where his men weren't. That night, at 0113, the long-range set clicked on right on schedule. "Echo 6, this is Echo 4, Mercer's voice said, a thread of satisfaction running under the words. "Told you were standing too close. Over." Once is a glitch, twice is a pattern. By the end of the week, every NCO in Echo Company knew to keep 0113 in mind. The first few nights, only Hall, Clay, and whatever poor private drew graveyard shift in the TOC heard the taps on the door between worlds. By the fifth night, there were 6 men in the cramped room when the long-range set warmed up. No one said they were there to listen to a dead man. They were just checking the log, making sure the net stayed clean. No one believed their own excuses. At 0113 on the dot, the set came alive. "Echo 6, this is Echo 4, the voice said, familiar now in the way scars became part of skin. "Radio check. Over." Hall answered. "Read you 5 by Echo 4, he said. "We have multiple ears on. Over." "Damn, didn't realize I was getting an audience," Mercer quipped. "Hope you brought popcorn." Over. "Knock off the comedy set," Hall said, but his tone had softened. There was a comfort in the rhythm. Call and response, the old dance. "Where are you calling from, Echo 4? Clay asked, leaning in toward the mic. "Same origin as before. Over." "Yeah," Mercer said. "Hill 317, the Wadi. The part of the map you guys keep circling and then walking past like it's not glaring at you. Over." "You're alone?" one of the sergeants asked, before he could stop himself. There was a pause, a soft exhale that might have been a laugh or a tired sigh. "Not as much as I'd like to be," Mercer said. "Over." The men shifted uneasily. Hall stuck to business. "You got more advice for us?" he asked. "Or are you just checking to see if we're still pretty? Over." "Hey, I die one time, and suddenly I'm needy," Mercer shot back. "Relax, Sarge. Tonight I'm just—" The line cracked. For a second, the channel filled with a sound that wasn't static. It was crowded, like voices trying to talk through each other. Half words, half breaths, a rush of something that made the inside of Hall's teeth ache. Then Mercer's voice cut back in, strained. "Just watching," he finished. "Over." "What was that?" Clay asked. "We had some kind of overlay. Over." "Yeah," Mercer said quietly. "We get some crosstalk out here." "From who?" Hall asked. Mercer didn't answer right away. When he did, the joking tone was gone. "You ever think about how much metal's in the ground under your boots?" he asked. "How many radios got buried with guys who didn't have time to turn them off? Killed in contact, set still keyed up, all that last breath and panic trapped on loops? Over." Clay swallowed. "I've heard of ghost recordings," he said. "Old chatter bleeding through. That what this is? Over." "In a manner of speaking," Mercer said. "But that's not what you need to worry about." The room seemed to lean closer to the speaker. "What do we need to worry about, Echo 4? Hall asked. "You ever notice how some valleys eat sound?" Mercer said. "You can fire a weapon and it doesn't echo. It just disappears. Like the air swallowed it. Over." The men exchanged glances. They all knew places like that. "Think of radio like sound," Mercer went on. "Maybe there are places that eat that too. Places where what you send doesn't come back, but it doesn't stop either. Just keeps bouncing around. Over." "Is that where you are?" Hall asked. Mercer chuckled. but there was no humor in it. Something like that, he said. Look, Sarge, I don't have long on this net tonight. They're listening closer. Over. They who? Clay asked. The answer came through quieter, like someone had leaned over Mercer's shoulder, hand over his mouth. You don't want to meet my neighbors, he said. Over. Static hissed like breath. Just do me a favor, he added. Don't send any more kids down Route Amber after dark. The road's hungry. Over. Hall exhaled slowly. Roger that, he said. We'll adjust the convoy schedule. Anything else? Yeah, Mercer said. Next time that captain from battalion tells you the threat level's downgraded, don't believe him. His map doesn't show what's walking around at night. The line crackled again. That crowded, pressing sound returned, like 100 throats clearing at once. Gotta go, Mercer said, voice suddenly distant. Sun's coming up where I am, or something that passes for it. Echo 4, out. The speaker went dead. The status light on the set flickered red briefly, then settled back into its usual green. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, one of the sergeants, Martinez, the one who hated superstitions, cleared his throat. This stays in this room, he said. We start telling privates that the dead guy's doing late-night AM talk radio. We're gonna have a panic on our hands. Clay nodded. I'll lock the logs, he said. Audio files too. You're recording these? Hall asked sharply. Clay looked offended. Top, I record everything, he said. My job doesn't stop because the caller's out of regs in a metaphysical sense. Hall rubbed a hand over his face. Fine, he said. Burn them to a separate drive. Label it, whatever you like. Just don't let battalion get their hands on it. Last thing we need is some colonel deciding we're all combat ineffective because our ghost is more helpful than their intel shop. He meant it as a joke. No one laughed. The third week after Mercer's death, the tempo shifted. Insider chatter suggested the local cell was getting bold. More IEDs, more probing fire on the outer cops. Echo Company got extended. More patrols, less sleep. Hall looked older. Clay started carrying a second notebook just for Echo 4 notes, scribbling down every weird hint, every suggestive fragment that slipped through the net at 0113. Don't take the valley road. Stay off the roof of the blue house near the market. Put your heavy gun on the right side of the truck tomorrow instead of the left. Little things, weird things, things that more often than not paid off. A patrol that stayed off the roof avoided being silhouetted for a sniper who put rounds through empty air instead. A convoy that shifted its machine gun saw the first burst tear into the brick around a hidden shooter instead of searching for him blind in the dark. Officially, it was coincidence, good tactics, veteran instinct. Unofficially, Echo Company had a guardian angel with a broken antenna. Then, one night, Mercer came through, sounding wrong. The voice was thinner, stretched. Echo 6, this is Echo 4, he said. How copy? Over. Hall was already leaning over the console before 0113. Read you, Echo 4, he said. You sound like shit. Over. Yeah, well, Mercer said. Reception's not great when you're calling from underneath things. Over. Clay frowned. Underneath what? He asked. Mercer didn't answer that. You got a patrol scheduled for Village Kilo tomorrow, he said instead. 8 men, 2 trucks. Same as always. Over. Hall flipped the clipboard. The schedule sat there, neat and doomed. How do you know that? He asked. Call it programming, Mercer said. You guys are predictable. Look, you need to cancel it. Over. Hall narrowed his eyes. Why? He asked. What's the threat? Over. The village, Mercer said. It's not there. Hall blinked. We've been there every week for 3 months, he said. Seen it with our own eyes. Over. You've seen a village, Mercer said. Not what it turns into after dark. Over. Clay shifted uncomfortably. This sounds like a bad horror movie, man, he muttered off mic. Mercer must have heard the tone because his own voice sharpened. You think I'm screwing around out here for fun? He snapped. I got dragged into something I don't understand, and I'm trying not to let it chew you up too. Over. The room went still. Hall forced his voice calm. Describe what you're seeing, Echo 4, he said. Mercer took a breath. When he spoke, the words came slowly. You know how in Nodis, when you look at a person, they're solid, right? He said. Full shape, heat signature and thermal. You can tell living from not. Roger, Hall said. I'm looking at Village Kilo right now, Mercer said. Except it's thin, like a picture someone didn't finish drawing. Some of the houses are wrong angles, roof lines that don't match what you see in the day, and there are doors that don't exist when the sun's up. Over. Clay stared at the radio like he could see through it. People? Hall asked. Yeah, Mercer said. People. But they're doubled. Like there's a layer that moves just a half second after they do. And in the alleys, there are things that only show up when they stand still too long. Over. Targets? One of the sergeants asked automatically. Mercer made a soft, horrible sound that might have been a laugh. You're not equipped for these targets, brother, he said. Your rifles don't mean shit to them. Over. Hall swore under his breath. You're telling me if we roll in there tomorrow, what happens? He demanded. Best case, Mercer said. Half your patrol comes back talking about how they lost time, or how their watches don't match, and nobody can remember who went down the side street first. Worst case, you bring something back out with you. Over. Static clawed at the edges of his words. Don't pretend you don't feel it, he added. That little pressure in your ears when you look at the place on the map? Your brain knows something's off even if you don't listen. Over. Hall ground his teeth. We're not in the business of scrubbing missions because our dead guy has a bad feeling, he said. You gotta give me something I can put in a report that isn't, the village looks skinny after dark. Over. Mercer was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had sunk to a rasp. Okay, he said. You want something concrete. The line hummed, like he'd shifted his position. You remember that little kid who always runs out when the trucks roll in? He asked. The one with the red shirt. Too big for him. Likes to do the fake salute thing. Over. Hall closed his eyes. Yeah, he said. I know him. He's not here tonight, Mercer said. There's something wearing him. Same size, same shirt. But when it waves at the road, it waves too long. Over. A shiver crawled down Clay's spine. I know you want to help, Hall said quietly. But you're asking me to go to battalion and say what? My KIA specialist phoned in from beyond the grave and says the AO's haunted. Please adjust. Over. Mercer sighed, a sound full of distance. You're right, he said. You're still playing by their rules. I'm not. So let me speak your language. He paused. Ask S2 about the SIGINT hit they got last night from that village, he said. About the radio that keyed up on an enemy frequency and then went quiet when they tried to triangulate. Hall's jaw clenched. How do you know about that? He asked. Because whatever keyed that radio is standing next to me right now, Mercer said. And it keeps turning its head like it's listening for you. Over. The room temperature seemed to dip. Cancel the patrol, Sarge, Mercer said softly. If I owe you anything, it's that. The channel fluttered. Behind Mercer's voice, that crowded noise surged again, a chorus of almost words, like 100 unkeyed mics opening at once. I think they're about done letting me talk to you, he added. I pushed it. Over. Who's they? Clay asked, unable to stop himself. There was a sound like a wet finger dragged across glass. The things that live where the map folds, Mercer said. The ones that learned how to listen when you lit up this valley with radios. Over. Mercer, Hall said, sudden urgency in his voice. What about you? What happens to you if we cut the mission? Over. Mercer chuckled again, tired. Don't waste your worry on me, Top, he said. I'm already where you're afraid your men will end up. Just don't give this place any more of your voices to play with. Echo 4, out. The line went dead so hard the speaker popped. The status light on the set blinked red once, then went out. For the first time since the call started, the long-range set stayed silent at 0114. No carrier, no hiss, just absence. In the morning, Hall did something he'd promised himself he wouldn't. He went to battalion. He didn't mention Mercer. He didn't have to. He framed it as a pattern. Village Kilo's gone cold in all the wrong ways, he told the S2 captain. Chatter dropped off right when it should have spiked. Last patrol reported weird vibes. Locals less friendly, more watching. And you got that SIGINT hit yesterday. It feels like a setup. The captain tapped his pen against his notepad. Gut feeling? He asked. Experience, Hall said. The captain considered. Finally, he sighed. Fine, he said. We'll redirect. Move the engagement op to Village Mike instead. But this goes in the log as pattern analysis, not eerie vibes. We don't get paid for those. Echo Company didn't roll into Village Kilo that day. Another unit did, 2 days later, after the pressure eased and the battalion commander got impatient with overcautiousness. They took contact inside the first 5 minutes. No KIA. 2 WIA from an RPG that hit the corner of a house instead of the back of their lead vehicle. The LT in charge later said the strangest thing wasn't the ambush. It was how the villagers behaved afterward. They were wrong, he told Hall over stale coffee, like they'd rehearsed being scared. Hall didn't write that part down. He had enough nightmares. Back at the base, 0113 came and went that night. The radio stayed mute. Clay turned the volume up, switched frequencies, double-checked antenna connections. Nothing. Maybe he moved on, Martinez said quietly, sitting on the edge of a folding chair, helmet dangling between his knees. Got whatever was tying him here sorted out. Clay stared at the set. Or maybe something cut his line, he said. Hall didn't say anything. He listened to the silence like it was its own kind of transmission. The next night, same thing. No voice, no weird static, just the normal low murmur of distant units, the occasional burst of coded traffic, the hollow sound of a net used to a presence that wasn't there anymore. By the 5th night, the men stopped gathering in the TOC. The war had other ways to demand their attention. Still, Hall found himself glancing at the clock as 113 slid by each night, just in case. Nothing came, until it did. 2 months later, Echo Company rotated out. Different desert, different set of walls, same sky. They left behind fresh paint on the barrier walls, new bullet scars on buildings that would long outlive the reasons they were there, and a digital archive full of logs, messages, and files that no one would ever read unless something went very wrong. Clay copied one particular folder onto a hard drive the size of his thumbnail and slipped it into a small, nondescript envelope. He handed it to Hall on the flight line. "What's this?" Hall asked. "Insurance," Clay said. "Or a souvenir. Depends how you look at it." Hall weighed it in his palm. "You labeled it?" he asked. Clay nodded. "Echo 4 net," he said. "It's all there, every night, every word." Hall considered dropping it right there, letting it disappear into the dust. Instead, he shoved it into his breast pocket. Once they were back stateside, things blurred. Yellow footprints, out processing briefs, too many forms, and not enough hours of sleep. Mercer's name was carved into a memorial somewhere. His parents got a neatly folded flag, and a script that had been read in 1,000 living rooms. The world spun on. Hall was the one who held on to the piece that didn't fit. Months later, on a night when the house was too quiet and the TV didn't help, he dug the envelope out of an old deployment bag. The hard drive felt absurdly light. He plugged it into his laptop. The files sat in a neat list: 0113 01, 0113 02, 0113 3. Audio logs, each roughly the same length. He hesitated for a long time before clicking the first one. The recording started with hum, the faint clatter of keyboards in the background, Clay swearing softly as he spilled coffee, then Mercer's voice. Echo 6, this is Echo 4. Radio check. Over. Hall listened. He listened to all of them. He listened to his own voice, harder and flatter than he remembered, asking questions no one should ever have to formulate. He listened to hints of something else on the line, that crowded non-sound, like the air just before a storm. When he reached the last file, the one from the night Mercer had talked about Village Kilo, the playback stuttered for a moment, buffer glitching. For half a second, the screen went black. When it came back, the audio had shifted. Mercer's voice still came through, but when he said, Echo 6, this is Echo 4, another voice spoke with him for a single syllable. A deeper one. Wrong. Not echo, not distortion. Like someone had leaned into the mic just beside him and said the word echo at the exact same time. Hall's chest tightened. He rewound, played it again. This time, it was just Mercer. He scrubbed back and forth, straining for anything his memory might have edited out. Nothing obvious. At the end of the final recording, after Mercer signed off, there was a faint sound Hall hadn't noticed before. Not static, not the squeal of a carrier dropping. A whisper. It wasn't in English. It was the sound someone might make when testing a mouth that wasn't theirs for the first time. Hall shut the laptop. He sat in the dark for a long time. The next day, he mailed a copy of the drive to Clay with no note. He smashed the original with a hammer and dropped the pieces into 3 different trash bags. He told himself it was for his own sanity. He didn't want the past calling him on nights when his guard was down. A year later, a former Echo Company private, now out, living in an apartment with bad insulation and worse neighbors, woke up at 9:13 a.m. to the sound of a familiar voice coming from his old deployment ruck in the corner. He hadn't touched the bag since he'd dropped it there months ago. The sound was faint, muffled, like a radio whispering through layers of canvas and memory. Echo 6, this is Echo 4, it said. Radio check. Over. The private didn't own a radio anymore. He turned on all the lights and didn't go back to sleep. Eventually, the sound stopped. Or he stopped hearing it. Hard to say which. Far away, in a valley that ate signals and refused to chew with its mouth closed, something that had once been Specialist Joshua Mercer, and maybe something else that had never been on any roster, stood where Hill 317 folded into whatever came next. He tilted his head, listening. Somewhere, out beyond his horizon, a dozen tiny green lights winked on as radios keyed across the world. He smiled without humor. Echo 4, still in the net, he murmured to nobody. For now. Radios are supposed to be clean things. Frequencies, channels, on, off. A voice goes up, comes down somewhere else. We pretend it's that simple, but every transmission leaves a mark. Every shouted contact report. Every whispered 9-line medevac. Every last, tell my wife I, that gets cut off mid-syllable. We scatter those moments into the air and never really ask where they end up. In most places, they fade. Heat death of small human sounds. But there are valleys in this world that eat more than sound. Places where mountains bend signals. Where old battles stacked metal and bone in layers deep enough to twist what passes through. You light spots like that up with decades of radios and radar and encrypted traffic. And you shouldn't be surprised if something learns to listen. And once something learns to listen, sometimes it learns to talk. Was it really Mercer on that net? Was he pulled sideways into some echo chamber of unfinished transmissions, working off a debt in warnings? Or did the valley just wear his voice like a mask, a familiar call sign over an unfamiliar intent? The men in Echo Company will tell you this. Whatever spoke to them knew things it shouldn't. Whatever spoke to them saved their lives more than once. Whatever spoke to them wasn't there when they went looking with boots and rifles and daylight. War leaves a lot of open loops. Men disappear into bad moments inside bad valleys. Their last words bounce around on dead frequencies. Their call signs get reassigned. But sometimes, a loop refuses to close. So the next time you hear a stray voice come over a channel, a call sign no one's used in years, a greeting in the tone of someone you buried, a warning that arrives just early enough to keep you breathing. Ask yourself, is that really them? Or is it the place they died, calling you in a language you'll trust? My name is Captain Nightwhisper. If you ever find yourself on a night shift, hand on a radio, listening to a net that feels too quiet, and a familiar voice from your past keys up and says, "Radio check, over," you can answer. Just be very careful what you promise to the thing on the other end of the signal. Because in some valleys, once you step onto that net, the net doesn't ever really let you go.